This is one of the strongest and most fun builds I've ever used in this game. No prismatic, no melee spam, just pure domination. This build is the Soul Punisher. Today's build revolves around Void Titan, taking advantage of two exotics that will allow us to annihilate any enemy that stands in our way. Choir of one of the best exotics in history, and Hazardous Propulsion. The burst damage capabilities of these two exotics is what originally made me want to make a build with them. Coming up, we're going to go over how we can effectively never die in grandmaster content while playing aggressively, and how we can deal a lot of damage very quickly to champions and bosses. First, I want to say all my builds are grandmaster difficulty approved, so they'll be effective in basically every piece of content. This build is actually going to be the one I take into the Vespers Host dungeon next episode. Secondly, the build covered in the video does not rely on artifact mods, meaning it'll remain good in future seasons. Let's get started, and the first thing we'll break down are our exotics. Choir of One is our exotic weapon, and if you saw my Void Hunter build video, you'll know just how strong this Void special aim auto rifle really is. While aiming down sights, Choir of One fires long-range projectiles that deal increased precision damage. Think of it like a very powerful scout rifle. When hit firing, you launch multiple slower moving projectiles in a spread pattern. These projectiles do a ton of damage and cost 5 ammo when shot. Rapid final blows cause targets to explode into a pool of radiolaria. These explosions and the subsequent radiolaria pools turn Choir into an amazing weapon for ad clear. Choir of One is so strong, it's like having a primary, special, and heavy weapon all in one, and that's basically how we're going to use it in this build. We're generally going to want to use the ADS mode on far away enemies, groups of enemies, and weaker enemies, and it's going to be our main firing mode for ad clear. This precision mode is also really good for the crit spots on Briggs and the crit spots on Tormentors. We're going to use the hipfire mode on beefier targets like champions, mini bosses, and bosses if they're close enough, but the hipfire can also be used on far away bosses that are big enough for the projectile to reach and connect. The hipfire attack will completely obliterate anything that gets in our face, but unless I'm desperate for a kill, I'll spend most of my time in the ADS mode in order to conserve ammo. The final piece of this weapon to talk about is the catalyst, and I previously stated that subsistence was my favorite option, but that quickly changed when I started using onslaught. Onslaught will increase the rate of fire after every kill up to 3 stacks. This means your Choir of One will shred enemies even faster than it already was before. This, in my opinion, is the best catalyst for this weapon, but if you prefer to use the other options, that is fine too. Onslaught just plays more into the fantasy of totally obliterating anything and everything that gets in our way. And with that being said, it's time to find out how we can turn this build up to 11 and annihilate enemies like champions by taking a look at our exotic armor piece. Hazardous Propulsion came out with the final shape, and it is one of the most fun exotics in the game, and it is also really strong. The exotic perk Danger Close states that weapon precision hits or final blows have a chance to load a kinetic Exodus rocket. Activating your class ability fires these loaded rockets, and these rockets do a lot of damage. 1 precision kill equals 1 stack granted, which means you only need 6 precision kills to gain all 6 stacks. Lucky for us, Choir of One does a lot of precision damage while aiming, meaning we'll consistently be able to get up to 6 stacks. The precision strength of Choir of One feeding into getting your Exodus rockets is one of the things that makes this build so much fun to use. All 6 rockets from Hazardous do this much damage to a barrier champion. Follow that up with Choir of One hipfire shots and the champion just falls over. There's something we can add to this to go even further beyond this level of burst damage, and that's related to the secondary part of the Hazardous Propulsion perk, which states that damaging targets with Exodus rockets temporarily increases the damage you deal with all other rockets. If all 6 rockets hit, that's a 35% damage increase, so we might as well run a rocket as our heavy. My favorite rocket to run has been the one from this season, the Void Rocket Faithkeeper. The main reason is that it's void, meaning it'll synergize with some of our armor mods. Now, I know that precision frame rockets do 20% less damage than aggressives, but in content where you're not trying to precisely optimize your damage, I find the intrinsic tracking in this frame to be much more useful than that extra damage. My go-to perks on this rocket are Impact Casing, Enhanced Autoloading Holster, and enhanced explosive light. Explosive light is basically free 25% more damage, and with autoloading, we can activate a barricade, shoot a rocket, unload Choir of One, and switch back to the rocket and shoot and repeat that cycle. This trio of rocket, hazardous propulsion rockets, and Choir of One leads to some crazy burst damage, but also really good damage overall. Now, I think due to the nature of the meta, a grenade launcher like a God Roll Edge Transit is probably better than running a rocket, especially in a boss damage setting. Even more so next season because we will have a ton of new grenade launcher artifact mods, but I do think the rocket is more fun to use in most cases. While we're on the topic of weapons, we might as well talk about our primary, and there isn't anything here that will drastically impact the build, so whatever you fancy here is fine, but I'll still give you my opinion. I really like a lot of Into the Light primaries. Things like Blast Furnace, Midnight Coup, and Hung Jury are all just great weapons to use in general. For general perk recommendations, Strategist for your class ability, Pugilist, and Demolitionist, any of those three will be helpful for getting your abilities back quicker. Shoot to Loot is not a bad perk to have on your primary, since shooting ammo bricks will reload all your weapons, and obviously pick up the ammo. Personally, I've been using Eidolon Ally, not because it's super good or anything in PvE, but just because I find it fun. I don't know about you, but for me, having fun is the most important thing when build crafting. The main point I want to make is that since we'll be using Choir of One 90% of the time, essentially using it as our primary, our actual primary weapon will not be that important. If you ever use your actual primary, it's either because you run out of ammo for Choir, or you just get bored of spamming Choir of One, which is perfectly fine too. Now that we've covered our exotics and legendary weapons, it's time to look at the subclass, which will dramatically increase our ad clear potential, survivability, and allow us to play much more aggressively. Before we get to that, I have to ask, do you miss Destiny 1? I think we all do, and you can experience that nostalgia right now by checking out my friend CB Gray. He's currently collecting every single Destiny 1 exotic in one stream. Yes, you heard that correctly. Right now, he's on his 23rd day of grinding. I just wanted to shout him out. He's a really cool guy and he always radiates joy. He's streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and the links are in the description. We are on Void Titan for the Soul Punisher build, and one of our aspects will be Bastion. The main thing from this aspect is that casting our barricade grants overshield to us and nearby allies. The barricade also regenerates the overshield. This means that whenever we pop our barricade, not only will we unleash a barrage of deadly rockets, but we'll also gain a full void overshield that has 50% damage resistance. Now, when it comes to our second aspect, there are actually two routes you can go down: offensive bulwark or controlled demolition. We'll talk about offensive first, then controlled demolition after. With offensive bulwark, while we have a void overshield, our grenade recharges faster, our melee has more range and damage, and melee final blows restore a small portion of the overshield. So basically, offensive bulwark is the aspect if you want to improve your abilities, faster grenades, and more melee damage. When it comes to controlled demolition, I would say this is the better aspect for survivability and ad clear. Hitting a target with the void ability or volatile explosion makes them volatile. Further damage to a volatile target causes them to explode. It grants health when they explode near you. So if you want better abilities, run offensive bulwark. If you want to cause volatile explosions and heal every time they go off, run controlled demolition. I've experimented with both and I prefer offensive bulwark, which is what the rest of this build will be based off. The grenade regen is really nice, especially since we don't have an exotic like Heart of Inmost Light to grant us increased ability regen. The melee damage increase is also pretty good, and it actually makes a melee like shield throw do decent damage in grandmaster content, allowing it to one-shot red bars. Speaking of melees, shield throw will be the melee, since we can use it at range and because it will grant us an overshield on hit, synergizing well with the benefits granted from offensive bulwark. Vortex will be the grenade, since it will pull all the enemies in, and it'll extend the weakening debuff the longest because we're running Echo of Undermining. The barricade will be rally, because it'll let us shoot from behind it using our weapons, and it'll make us reload much faster. Lastly, Twilight Arsenal is the best super to run. And now let's talk about our fragments. Our first pick is Echo of Starvation. Picking up a Void Breach or an Orb of Power grants Devour. We won't be making Void Breaches with this build, but we will be making a lot of orbs thanks to armor mods like Void Siphon and Reaper. Devour will heal us when we pick up an orb and whenever we get a kill while it's active. It'll also grant a chunk of grenade energy on every kill. Devour will allow us to play much more aggressively in harder content and increase our grenade uptime. That is important for our next fragment, one that I already mentioned, Echo of Undermining. Void grenades weaken targets. Pretty simple to understand, and this fragment is important for letting us do more damage to those higher tier enemies with our weapon damage rotation. It also makes our vortex grenade even better at taking out groups of enemies. Next up, we have Echo of Vigilance. Defeating a target while your shields are depleted grants you a temporary void overshield. This fragment can be a lifesaver in hard content. The last fragment is one that honestly could be replaced, but I like it and I'll explain why. This is Echo of Instability. Defeating targets with grenades grants volatile rounds to your void weapons. So this will apply not only to our Choir of One, making it even better at ad clear, but also to our void heavy weapon. When you have volatile rounds, it'll let your void weapon shoot through any shield, just like if you had anti-barrier rounds. Being able to shoot through something like a faraway knight shield, for example, or a failing shield, just makes Choir of One feel that much better to use. It does require you to basically waste a grenade on trash mobs so that you get a kill, and I'll admit that the benefits don't show up that often in harder content, but they are helpful when they do. With that said, maybe you find invisibility on finishers more helpful with Echo of Obscurity, or maybe you want your Vortex grenade to last longer with Echo of Remnants. Personally, I'll keep using Echo of Instability, but I could see why you might not want to, seeing as how Choir of One is already so good at ad clear with those Vex explosions. Let me know what you would run for this final fragment down in the comments. And that is the complete breakdown of the subclass. This was originally going to be a prismatic build, but I found the survivability from Devour and the Void Overshields much more useful than even something like Transcendence on Prismatic. I also really love the duality of having a barricade that not only heals you from Bastion, but also outputs a lot of damage from Hazardous Propulsion. And now it's time to talk about armor. Your stats should focus on 100 resilience as always for that 30% damage resistance, and then focus on as high discipline and strength as possible to get your grenades and melees back quicker. Our helmet will have Harmonic Siphon, which is the same as Void Siphon but costs less. On the arms, we have Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike, which will give us barricade energy on hits with our grenade and melee. Faster barricades just means more Exodus rockets to throw out. We'll also run either heavy-handed or firepower. I like heavy-handed for easier content, so that our shield throw kills generate orbs. But for harder content where the shield throw won't always guarantee a kill, I like firepower, so our grenade kills generate orbs. For the chest piece, run double harmonic reserves. These will act as void reserves, but just cost less. We want our Choir of One to have as much ammo as possible, especially since the total reserves will be decreased soon, and these reserve mods will help out a lot with that. For the Faithkeeper rocket I recommended, these mods will bring the reserves up to a whopping 12 rockets, which is really good. The final mod on the chest piece should be whatever resist mod is appropriate for your current activity. For the legs, run one Void Scavenger mod for more ammo on ammo bricks, one Void Weapon Surge for 10% more Void Weapon damage, and then run Insulation. Insulation grants 4% of your class ability whenever you pick up an Orb of Power. That might not sound like a lot, but just 5 orbs equals 20% of your barricade. To finish off the armor on our class item, run Reaper. After you use your barricade, your next weapon kill generates an Orb of Power. For the next mod, there are 2 options: Utility Finisher or Special Finisher. Utility gives class ability energy whenever you get a finisher kill while having 3 armor charges, while Special Finisher instead gives a special ammo brick. This is really a matter of if you value Choir of One ammo more or your barricade more. I currently run Utility Finisher since it does give a good chunk of barricade energy, but I might switch to Special Finisher whenever the ammo reserves are nerfed on Choir. For the last mod, run Powerful Attraction. When you use your barricade, it collects any orb within a 12.5 meter radius. This means you'll get Devour whenever you pop your barricade if there are orbs nearby, on top of all the other benefits the barricade already gives. And with the armor mods complete, we've basically covered everything you need to know about the build. Now, like I said at the beginning, the build that I discussed and the footage I showed in the video doesn't rely on any artifact mods to be this strong. But obviously, you would want to run the best artifact mods during any given season. This episode, there were a lot of good artifact mods for auto rifles. In 1 week for the next episode, there seemed to be some good void related artifact mods and also some great grenade launcher artifact mods if you want to run Edge Transit as your heavy. The last part of my build videos is a step-by-step breakdown of how you might want to approach a gameplay scenario with this build, so let's get into it. Step 1, gain Devour. Generate an Orb of Power by either getting a double kill with your Void weapon, getting a melee kill, or popping your barricade, then getting a kill. Devour will be the foundation upon which we can enact all the other pieces of the build. Step 2, build up those hazardous propulsion rockets. Use the Choir of One ADS mode to get headshots and headshot kills. One headshot kill equals one loaded rocket, and you can get up to 6 loaded rockets. Using your barricade will unleash all of these loaded Exodus rockets. Step 3, unload on strong enemies. Whether it be a champion or a boss, you can now do a massive amount of damage with your loaded rockets. First, use your Vortex Grenade to weaken, then activate the Rally Barricade, and follow that up by unleashing your Choir of One hipfire shots as well as your Void heavy weapon of choice. And with that, you will obliterate anything that stands in your way. Step 4, continue the cycle. Keep on getting kills, using your abilities, collecting orbs, and building up those hazardous propulsion rockets. As long as you keep getting kills, it will be very hard for you to die while you have Devour. And that is the entire Soul Punisher build. It is truly one of the best builds I've ever used, even competing with the very strong Prismatic Titan Consecration build in some ways. The best part is, it's going to get even better next episode. Barricades will gain the ability to distract enemies, and the Void Overshield will go from granting 50% damage resist to 70% damage resist. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. Be kind to each other always, and I will see you soon.